In last lectures, we learned a lot about how we can use property binding and string interpolation to output data in the template. Let's now react to events. For example, we have a button here, and after 2 seconds this button is enabled, so it would be nice if we could do something once we click the button. Now, I will soon show you how we can actually add a new server, how we can add a new replication of our server selector, of our server component here. For now, what I want to do is, I want to output something. I will remove this text here, and instead here, I want to output the value of a property. I'll create this property, and again, you may ignore ng-on-init for now, I will come back to this. I will name it server creation status, and initially I will set it to no server was created, like this. Now this property can be output via string interpolation, server creation status. And I just told you I don't want to continue outputting data, we want to listen to events. So I promised it, we'll do it. I will add another method below here, and I will name this method onCreateServer. The on at the beginning to kind of make clear that this will be triggered from within my template. You don't have to name it on something, but it kind of makes it easier to understand who will call this method. Well, the user will basically by doing something. Some event will call it. That is what I want to symbolize with that. So in here I will set the server creation status to server was created. So the missing piece of course is to call this method, and now here is where event binding comes into play. We want to listen to this click event here, and typically you have the onClick attribute on the HTML element where you can now execute some JavaScript code. We won't use that with Angular though. Here we have the syntax Angular offers us event binding, which uses parentheses, like property binding used squared brackets. For events, parentheses are the signal that we're using event binding. And here we have to specify the name of the event between the parentheses. For example, click. And you can basically bind to all the events made available by the HTML attribute you're placing this on. So if you have onClick, on mouse enter, you could bind to click mouse enter without the on at the beginning. So we bind to the click event, and now between the quotation marks, we put the code we want to execute once this event occurs. Now, oftentimes you will call a method here. So let's do this. Let's point to the method we want to execute, which is onCreateServer with parentheses. So this method will now get executed whenever we click the button. As a side note, you don't have to execute a method here. You could also put the code you want to execute right between the quotation marks. Oftentimes, this is not very good because you want to execute more code if some event happens. But if all you want to do is set some Boolean property to true, for example, well, you can definitely do this inline the template. As a general rule, though, you shouldn't put too much logic into your templates, though. So now we're binding the click event, and we execute the onCreateServer method when it occurs. So let's see this in action. In our application, let's reload the page. The button gets enabled. And now watch this part here. If I click the button, it changes to server was created because we are triggering our own method here. And this is how simple event binding works. Use parentheses, the event name in between, and then between the quotation marks, the code you want to execute when this event occurs.